The pristine crystalline halls of the Stellar Assembly's central station gleamed with an almost painful perfection. High Observer Kelrax adjusted his ceremonial robes for the fourth time in as many minutes, his scaled appendages carefully smoothing every microscopic wrinkle. The gesture wasn't necessary. His attire had been maintained by automated systems to meet the Assembly's exacting standards, but 5 centuries of ingrained protocol were difficult to ignore. "The humans have arrived at Docking Bay Epsilon 7, announced his assistant, a hovering array of sensors and communication devices arranged in the precise geometric pattern that denoted its third-tier administrative status. Kelrax permitted himself a small sigh. "And their delegation leader. They claim all members are of equal standing." Of course they did. The humans had been confounding assembly protocols since their first contact 3 standard cycles ago. Their ships arrived in formations that seemed random until sensor analysis revealed they were actually optimized for both defensive coverage and fuel efficiency. Their communications followed no standardized pattern, yet somehow conveyed more information than the Assembly's carefully structured protocols. The turbolift hummed with mathematical precision as it carried Kelrax to the observation deck. Through the transparent barriers, he watched the human vessel dock. Its hull bore the marks of numerous repairs, each seemingly executed with different methodologies. The sight made his scales itch. "High Observer," the voice called from behind him. "The preliminary analysis you requested." Senior Analyst Zinri approached, her crystalline form refracting the station's light in the exact pattern that denoted her rank and specialization. She projected a holographic display of the human vessel's crew manifest. "Fascinating irregularities," she began. "Their command structure appears to shift based on undefined variables." During the approach, 3 different crew members issued course corrections. None held navigational ranks, yet each adjustment proved optimal for their flight path. Kelrax studied the data. The humans' organizational patterns defied the Assembly's classification systems. Their efficiency ratings matched or exceeded those of species with millennia of documented hierarchical development, yet they achieved these results through methods that appeared, to Assembly observers, completely chaotic. "The Council requires answers," Kelrax stated. "We cannot integrate a species whose organizational principles we don't understand. The risk of disruption to established protocols is too high." "There is another option," Zinra suggested, her crystalline form shifting to indicate careful consideration. "The Extended Observation Initiative." Kelrax's scales rippled with surprise. The initiative was rarely implemented, reserved for species that demonstrated abilities the Assembly couldn't immediately classify. It would mean embedding observers within human operations, studying them in their natural organizational state. Their methods must be documented, he decided. Select a preliminary observation team. Choose those with high adaptability ratings. They'll need it. Through the barrier, he watched as the human crew disembarked. They moved with an apparently casual demeanor that nonetheless displayed remarkable spatial efficiency. Without any visible signals, they arranged themselves to maintain optimal coverage of their surroundings, while simultaneously conducting equipment checks and initiating diplomatic protocols. "Note this moment," Kelrax instructed his assistant. "The Assembly's understanding of organizational theory is about to be challenged. Either we'll discover the underlying structure of human efficiency, or—" He left the alternative unspoken. In all his centuries of service, he'd never encountered a species that achieved high efficiency without rigid hierarchical structures. If the humans were truly operating under a different paradigm, it would force the Assembly to reevaluate its most fundamental principles. The observation deck sensors recorded everything. Every movement, every interaction, every seemingly random decision that somehow contributed to the humans' inexplicable effectiveness. Kelrax had a growing suspicion that the Extended Observation Initiative was about to become the most important study in Assembly history. He just wished he could shake the feeling that they weren't really observing chaos being transformed into order, but rather order so sophisticated it only appeared chaotic to their limited understanding. Dr. Sarah Chen's reputation preceded her arrival at any salvage site. Assembly observers had filled countless data crystals, attempting to understand how her operation consistently outperformed even the most established salvage teams in the sector. Their latest report sat untouched on High Observer Kelrax's desk, its conclusions as baffling as ever. The patchwork pioneer dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a grace that belied its cobbled-together appearance. The ship resembled a living history of space engineering, with components from a dozen different cultures seamlessly integrated into its structure. Each modification told a story of adaptation and improvement. "Engineering reports optimal function," announced Riley, who technically served as ship's mechanic, but often found himself coordinating emergency responses. Nobody had assigned him this role. He simply stepped into it when needed. Doc acknowledged the report with a slight nod, her attention focused on the massive derelict vessel floating before them. The abandoned research station had been declared untouchable by 3 different salvage companies, its hazard rating too high for standard recovery procedures. "What do you see?" she asked the bridge crew, her quiet voice carrying no command but somehow demanding attention. "Power cores unstable," offered Zhang from the sensor station. She had been a theoretical physicist before finding her way to Doc's crew. "But the fluctuation pattern suggests it's containable. Radiation levels make standard boarding impossible," added Marcus, a former deep-sea welder who now handled their most dangerous extraction operations. "But if we approach from the ventral axis..." Doc listened as her crew built upon each other's observations, each contribution flowing naturally into the next. The assembly observers present struggled to document the decision-making process, their protocols unable to capture the organic way the humans developed their strategy. "The humans appear to be communicating through some form of shared consciousness," one observer noted in their log. "Yet scans indicate no telepathic abilities or technological assistance. They simply know." What the observers failed to understand was that Doc's crew didn't need formal protocols. Years of working together had taught them to read subtle cues. A raised eyebrow, a thoughtful pause, a slight shift in posture. Each person's expertise was known and respected, their contributions valued not by rank, but by relevance. Standard procedure would require 17 separate authorizations before approaching a derelict of this classification. The second observer commented, their crystalline form vibrating with confusion. Doc smiled slightly as she watched her crew prepare for the operation. Chen, their resident electronics specialist, was already modifying environmental suits while discussing shield harmonics with Riley. No orders had been given, yet everyone moved with purpose. "Remember," Doc said softly, "we're not just here for salvage. There might be research data worth preserving. Stay curious." The simple statement sent ripples of adjustment through the crew's preparations. Marcus began recalibrating his cutting equipment for more precise work. Zhang pulled up additional sensor protocols. The entire operation shifted focus without a single formal order being issued. The observers' crystals nearly cracked trying to document the efficiency ratings. By their calculations, Doc's team was operating at 147% of expected performance levels, yet their organizational structure remained indecipherable. What they couldn't quantify was the true source of the crew's effectiveness: trust. Doc had built her team not by selecting the most qualified candidates, but by finding people who could think independently while working together. Each crew member knew their skills would be valued, their concerns heard, and their judgment respected. As the patchwork pioneer maneuvered into position, Doc watched her crew with quiet pride. The assembly might never understand their methods, but the results spoke for themselves. In the dangerous realm of deep space salvage, where rigid protocols often meant death, adaptability wasn't just an advantage, it was survival. The derelict station loomed before them, its challenges waiting to be met by a crew that functioned as a single organism, led by a captain who never needed to command. The first warning came as a subtle fluctuation in the Patchwork Pioneer's long-range sensors. Zhang frowned at her readings, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface as she refined the scan parameters. "Doc," she called out, her voice carrying that particular tone the crew had learned to recognize. "You might want to see this." The stellar phenomenon had appeared without warning, a massive surge of electromagnetic energy that defied standard classification. Within hours, the situation escalated from a scientific curiosity to a sector-wide emergency. 3 major trade routes lay in its path, along with 17 stations and countless vessels. The assembly's response was immediate and precisely according to protocol. Emergency Response Fleet Delta 7 deployed from their staging area, their ships arranged in perfect geometric formations. High Observer Kelrax personally oversaw the coordination effort from Central Command. Emergency Protocol 7249B is now in effect, announced the Assembly's broadcast network. All vessels will conform to standardized communication protocols. Response units will maintain prescribed formations and await specific authorization before engaging in rescue operations. Aboard the Patchwork Pioneer, Doc watched the Assembly's careful choreography with growing concern. "Zhang, what's the energy dispersion pattern telling us?" "It's evolving," Zhang replied, sharing her display with the bridge crew. "The Assembly's models assume a linear progression. But look at these eddies. The phenomenon is creating feedback loops, amplifying itself." Riley leaned in, his engineer's eye catching something in the data. "Those stations in the outer band, their shields won't handle the secondary waves, not with standard configurations." No orders were given, but the crew's actions shifted seamlessly. Marcus began modifying their spare shield generators, while Chen reprogrammed power distribution systems. The Assembly observers aboard noted with growing agitation that none of these activities fell within approved emergency protocols. "The human vessel is deviating from designated response patterns," one observer reported to Central Command. "They appear to be implementing unauthorized modifications to critical systems." The Assembly's response fleet reached the first affected station exactly on schedule. Their formations were perfect, their protocols followed to the letter. They were completely unprepared for the reality of the situation. The first wave of electromagnetic energy swept through the area, stronger than their models had predicted. 3 assembly ships lost power immediately, their standardized shields proving inadequate against the evolving threat. The station they had come to protect began experiencing cascading systems failures. "Response units will maintain formation and await updated protocols," Central Command broadcasted, even as more ships reported critical system failures. The Patchwork Pioneer arrived at the edge of the affected zone, its modified shields already adapting to the chaotic energy patterns. Doc's crew had transformed their salvage vessel into something new, drawing on their collective experience to create solutions no protocol could have anticipated. "Assembly Command, this is the Patchwork Pioneer," Doc transmitted, her calm voice cutting through the growing chaos. "We're picking up life signs from the damaged ships. Request permission to assist." "Negative, Patchwork Pioneer. Maintain position and await proper authorization. Emergency protocols do not allow for unstructured rescue attempts." Doc exchanged glances with her crew. No words were needed. Chen was already preparing their modified emergency transmitters. Marcus had the rescue drones ready, each one upgraded with the shield modifications Riley had developed. "Assembly Command," Doc responded, her voice carefully neutral. "We acknowledge your protocols. We also see people who need immediate help. Make a note in your report. We'll accept the consequences of our actions after everyone is safe." The observers aboard the Pioneer watched in stunned silence as the human crew sprang into action. There was no command structure, no formal orders, just a seamless flow of coordinated effort. Each crew member anticipated needs before they arose, adapted to changing conditions without instruction, and somehow maintained perfect awareness of their teammates' actions. As the phenomenon's next wave approached, the assembly's perfect formation began to crumble. But in the chaos, a different kind of order was about to emerge, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about effective crisis response. The Patchwork Pioneers mess hall had transformed into an impromptu command center, though no one had given the order. Kai, normally the ship's cook, stood before a holographic display of the sector, coordinating refugee movements with a precision that stunned the assembly observers. "Living quarters on Deck 3 can handle another 47, he announced, updating the display with a gesture. "Medical Bay reports they're ready for critical cases from Station 9. The observers frantically documented how a culinary specialist was managing complex logistics without any formal training. What they failed to understand was that Kay's years of managing kitchen inventory, crew dietary needs, and meal scheduling had perfectly prepared him for this moment. "Shield modifications are ready for transmission to other vessels," Riley called out from his makeshift engineering station, a collection of spare parts and screens arranged across what had been the dining table, simple enough that any ship's crew can implement them in under 20 minutes. Doc nodded, watching as her crew's innovations spread through the crisis zone. 3 human ships had already arrived, their crews seamlessly integrating into the evolving response system. The assembly observers noted with alarm that several alien vessels had begun mimicking these unauthorized modifications and protocols. "The human organizational contamination is spreading," one observer reported to Central Command. "Their chaos is infecting established response patterns." But it wasn't chaos. Zhang, working with a young Centaurian physicist from a rescued research vessel, had mapped the electromagnetic phenomenon's behavior. Their combined perspectives, human intuition and alien mathematical precision, revealed patterns that neither approach could have identified alone. "Look at how they adapt," the second observer whispered, crystal matrix vibrating with forbidden fascination. No commands given, no hierarchical consultation, yet every action builds upon the others. Marcus had transformed the cargo bay into a repair facility, teaching crews from 3 different species how to modify their ship systems. His deep-sea welding experience proved surprisingly applicable to reinforcing alien hull designs against the electromagnetic waves. The assembly's rigid protocols had fragmented in the face of the crisis, their perfect formations scattered by the reality of an evolving threat. But something new was emerging from the disruption. Ships of different species began organizing into fluid groups, adapting their positions based on shield strength and power reserves rather than prescribed formations. "Central Command demands we restore order," the first observer announced, their crystalline form clouded with confusion. "But efficiency ratings have increased by 200% since the humans initiated their response pattern." Doc moved through the transformed mess hall, her presence felt rather than announced. She paused to review Zhang's calculations, offered a suggestion for Riley's shield modifications, and helped Kai optimize his refugee distribution algorithm. Each interaction was brief, but the ripples spread through the entire operation. "They function like a neural network," the second observer noted, each individual acting as both processor and transmitter, sharing information and adapting responses without central control. The next wave of electromagnetic energy approached, stronger than the last. But this time, the assembled ships were ready. Formation shifted organically, stronger shields protecting weaker vessels. Response teams flowed between ships and stations, distributing resources and implementing modifications with fluid efficiency. "This isn't chaos," the second observer finally realized. "This is evolution in action." The assembly's protocols had failed to contain the crisis, but in that failure, they witnessed something remarkable. The emergence of a new kind of order, one born from the very adaptability they had dismissed as primitive. Doc watched from the Pioneer's viewport as human and alien crews worked together, their actions guided not by rules but by shared purpose. The assembly's perfect system was breaking down, but something far more resilient was taking its place. The observers' reports would shake the assembly's foundations, but for now they could only watch and record as humanity's chaotic methods proved that true efficiency didn't require control. It required freedom to adapt. The assembly's central command viewing chamber had never been so crowded. High Observer Kelrak stood before the gathered council, struggling to explain the unprecedented events unfolding across their displays. The emergency response operation had evolved far beyond any established protocols, yet the efficiency ratings were impossible to ignore. "Watch this recording," Kelrak instructed, highlighting a particular incident. The holographic display showed a young Meridian engineering team adapting one of Riley's shield modifications. Instead of following standard procedures, they were implementing improvements based on their own insights. "They're learning," senior analyst Zinray observed, her crystalline form shifting with concern. "Not just copying human methods, but incorporating them into their own technical understanding." On another display, a Centaurian science vessel had abandoned its designated observation position to assist with refugee coordination. Their crew had integrated seamlessly into Kai's distribution network, adding their own species' mathematical precision to his intuitive system. "The contamination spreads exponentially," one council member declared. These younger crews showed dangerous signs of independent thinking. But the results were undeniable. The modified response fleet now moved like a living organism, adapting to each new wave of electromagnetic energy. Ships that should have been destroyed survived through cooperative action. Stations that should have been evacuated remained operational through innovative solutions. Aboard the Patchwork Pioneer, Doc reviewed the latest efficiency reports with quiet satisfaction. The observers assigned to her ship had given up trying to classify the organizational structure they were witnessing. Their own younger members had begun asking uncomfortable questions about the assembly's rigid protocols. "Your methods defy conventional analysis," the junior observer admitted, their crystalline form vibrating with barely contained curiosity. "Yet we cannot deny their effectiveness. How do you maintain order without hierarchy?" Doc smiled, gesturing to where Riley and a young Meridian engineer were sketching modifications on a shared display. No translation protocols were active, but they communicated through a combination of technical drawings, hand gestures, and shared understanding of their craft. "We don't maintain order," she explained. "We allow it to emerge naturally." The concept sent shockwaves through the observer's crystal matrix. The idea that order could arise without being imposed challenged the very foundation of assembly philosophy. Back in Central Command, the crisis had evolved into something far more threatening to the assembly than mere electromagnetic disruption. Young crews throughout the sector were beginning to question established protocols. Some even suggested that the human approach might represent a more advanced form of organization. "We must restore proper authority," a council elder insisted. "These human methods may appear effective, but they threaten millennia of carefully developed protocols." Kelrak studied the efficiency displays, noting how the integrated fleet's performance exceeded all historical benchmarks. "Perhaps," he ventured carefully, "what we're witnessing is not a regression to chaos, but an evolution toward a more sophisticated form of order." The chamber erupted in dispute. The very suggestion that the assembly's perfect system might be improved was nearly heretical. Yet the evidence continued to mount as more young crews adopted aspects of human organizational methods. Throughout the sector, the ripples of change spread. Crews began sharing innovations without waiting for official approval. Cross-species teams formed spontaneously to address emerging challenges. The assembly's perfect hierarchy was developing hairline fractures, not from external pressure, but from the realization that there might be a better way. "Their influence cannot be contained," Zinra reported, reviewing the latest data. "The humans aren't destroying our system. They're showing us its limitations." The assembly faced a choice: adapt to this new understanding or risk becoming obsolete. As they debated in their crystalline chamber, the combined fleet continued to demonstrate that true efficiency didn't require control. It required the freedom to evolve. The assembly's emergency broadcast cut through all communication channels, its crystalline tones carrying an edge of authority that brooked no argument. "Attention all vessels. Emergency Protocol Override 973 is now in effect. All ships will immediately resume standard formation and protocols. Non-compliance will result in immediate suspension of operational privileges." Doc stood on the Patchwork Pioneer's bridge, watching as the carefully coordinated rescue fleet began to fragment. Assembly vessels reluctantly broke away from their efficient adaptive patterns, returning to the rigid formations that had already proven inadequate. "They're going to get people killed," Jean muttered, her sensors showing the next electromagnetic wave building to unprecedented levels. The phenomenon had evolved beyond their initial predictions, but their responsive strategy had been working. The observers aboard the Pioneer transmitted their own warning to Central Command. Efficiency rates dropping across all sectors. Returning to standard protocols will result in significant casualties. "The Assembly acknowledges your concern," came the reply, "but order must be maintained. The current situation has exceeded acceptable parameters of organizational deviation." Riley looked up from his engineering station, where he'd been coordinating shield modifications with a mixed group of human and alien vessels. "Doc, 3 stations are running on our modified shield configurations. If they revert to standard protocols..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what would happen when the next wave hit. The Assembly's insistence on control would doom the very people they were trying to protect. "All vessels, return to designated positions," the Assembly broadcast continued. "This is your final warning." Doc watched as some of the younger alien crews hesitated, caught between their training and their recent experience. The Meridian engineering team they'd worked with still held position, their ship's modified shields protecting a vulnerable research station. A Centaurian science vessel continued its coordinated observations with Zhang, their combined data essential for predicting the phenomenon's behavior. "Pioneer," the Assembly command cut in. "You will stand down and return to approved protocols immediately." The entire bridge crew turned to Doc, but she didn't need to give any orders. They all understood what was at stake. The Assembly's perfect system was about to cause perfect devastation. "Assembly command," Doc responded, her voice calm but firm. "We acknowledge your authority. We also acknowledge reality. The next wave hits in 17 minutes. Your protocols will fail. People will die. We choose to prevent that. This is your final warning." The crystalline voice hardened. "Return to formation or face immediate sanctions." Doc smiled slightly, reminded of something her grandmother once told her about the difference between authority and leadership. Noted. "Pioneer maintaining current position and operations. We invite any vessels who wish to survive the next wave to do the same." The observers' crystals vibrated with unprecedented frequencies as they documented what happened next. Across the sector, ships began breaking formation. Not just human vessels, but crews from dozens of species who had seen the effectiveness of adaptive organization. "This is Meridian Engineering Vessel 7. A young voice broke through the channels. "Maintaining shield modifications and current position. Centaurian Science Ship 12. Continuing coordinated observations." More voices joined in, each choosing survival over protocol. The Assembly's perfect formation dissolved as ship after ship opted to follow the proven effectiveness of human methods rather than the rigid requirements of traditional authority. "You are all in violation." The Assembly's broadcast crackled with barely contained confusion. "This is not acceptable. This is not ordered. This is not. This is survival," Doc answered simply. "And sometimes survival requires us to evolve beyond our comfortable patterns." As the electromagnetic wave approached, the combined fleet demonstrated a truth the Assembly had forgotten. True order doesn't require external control. It emerges from the collective wisdom of those facing a challenge together. The Assembly's perfect system was breaking apart, but something stronger was taking its place. An organization born of necessity, shaped by experience, and proven by results. Senior observer Zinra's crystalline form pulsed with unprecedented patterns as she reviewed the data for the 100th time. The electromagnetic crisis had passed, but its aftermath had left the Assembly with an even greater challenge: understanding exactly how the human-led response had succeeded. "Look here," she indicated to High Observer Kelrax, highlighting a series of interactions aboard the Patchwork Pioneer. We've been analyzing their organizational structure from the wrong perspective entirely. The holographic display showed multiple instances of the crew's responses during critical moments. Each scenario appeared chaotic at first glance, but Zinra had finally seen what they'd all been missing. "It's not chaos," she explained, her crystal matrix vibrating with excitement. "It's a complex adaptive system that operates on multiple levels simultaneously, like a living organism's nervous system." Kellerak studied the patterns she highlighted. When Doc's crew responded to a crisis, their actions rippled through the group like neurons firing in a brain. Each member acted as both sensor and processor, gathering information and contributing to the collective response without needing central coordination. "Observe this sequence," Zinra continued, showing the moment when Riley's shield modifications spread through the fleet. "The humans don't just share information, they evolve it. Each implementation added new improvements, which were then fed back into the network." In the assembly's diplomatic chamber, Doc sat quietly as the observers presented their findings. The Patchwork Pioneers crew had become the subject of intense study, their every interaction analyzed for deeper understanding. "Your species developed this organizational method naturally?" one council member asked, their crystalline form showing signs of distress at the implications. "We didn't develop it," Doc replied. "We inherited it. It's how human communities have functioned for thousands of years. We just scaled it up to work in space." The revelation sent shockwaves through the Assembly's leadership. They had assumed humanity's apparent disorder indicated a primitive stage of development. Instead, they were witnessing the result of millions of years of social evolution. Their neural network organization, Zinra explained to the Council, allows for rapid adaptation and innovation. Each individual maintains autonomy while simultaneously contributing to and drawing from the collective intelligence of the group. The evidence was undeniable. During the crisis, Doc's methods had demonstrated superiority not because they ignored order, but because they operated on a more sophisticated understanding of how order naturally emerges. Consider their response times. Zinra highlighted another dataset. No authorization delays, no protocol reviews, no hierarchical bottlenecks. The system adapts in real time because every member is empowered to both sense and respond. The younger observers, particularly those who had been aboard the Pioneer, showed signs of profound transformation in their crystal matrices. They had experienced firsthand how effective this organic organization could be. "But how can we trust a system we cannot control?" an elder council member demanded. "The same way we trust our own bodies," Doc answered. "Your neural systems handle millions of complex operations without conscious control. Trust isn't imposed from above. It emerges from experience and proven results." Zinra's analysis continued to reveal deeper patterns. The human crew's casual conversations served as constant system diagnostics. Their social interactions were actually complex information exchanges. Even their recreational activities helped maintain and strengthen their organizational neural network. "We've been trying to impose order on the universe," Kellerak realized, his scales shifting with the weight of the revelation. The humans learned to let order emerge naturally. The Assembly faced an uncomfortable truth. Their perfect system wasn't the pinnacle of organizational evolution. It was a transitional stage, like a child first learning to walk by following rigid rules before developing the fluid grace of natural movement. Doc watched the realization spread through the crystalline forms of the Assembly leadership. The crisis had forced them to see what humanity had learned long ago, that true efficiency comes not from controlling chaos, but from understanding its underlying patterns. The Great Hall of Classifications within the Assembly's central station had remained unchanged for 10,000 years. Its crystalline walls displayed the carefully ordered hierarchy of all known species, each categorized by their organizational development. Now, for the first time in living memory, the classifications were being rewritten. High Observer Kellerak stood before the assembled council, his scales reflecting the soft light as he presented the findings that would reshape their understanding of civilization itself. Behind him, Doc and her crew watched quietly, their presence a testament to the changes they had inadvertently sparked. "We propose a new classification," Kelrax announced, "one that acknowledges what we have learned. Humanity's organizational method isn't primitive. It represents an advanced stage of development we had not previously recognized." The holographic displays showed detailed analysis of the Patchwork Pioneers' operations during the crisis. Each seemingly chaotic interaction now revealed its hidden sophistication, like a complex dance viewed from above. Their neural network organization, Senior Analyst Zinra explained, demonstrates three key advances beyond our current systems. First, it processes information faster by eliminating hierarchical bottlenecks. Second, it adapts to new situations without requiring protocol updates. Third, it actually becomes more efficient as complexity increases. The evidence was irrefutable. During the crisis, ships using human organizational methods had shown consistent improvement in performance, while those following rigid protocols had struggled increasingly as situations evolved. But the most remarkable discovery, Kelrax continued, is that this method can be learned. The younger crews who adopted human approaches during the crisis didn't just copy their techniques. They developed their own versions adapted to their species' unique characteristics. The council chamber hummed with discussion as members processed the implications. The Meridian engineering teams had already begun implementing modified versions of the human organization style, creating hybrid systems that combine their natural precision with human adaptability. "We therefore propose," Kelrax announced, "the creation of a new classification, Advanced Adaptive Organization. This represents not a variation of existing hierarchical systems, but an evolutionary step beyond them." Doc watched as the classification matrix shifted, its crystalline structure reorganizing to accommodate this new understanding. The human entry moved from its previous position among developing species to a new category that acknowledged their organizational sophistication. "The assembly must evolve," Zinray added, her crystal form pulsing with conviction. "We have discovered that our perfect system isn't the endpoint of organizational development. It's a transitional stage." The younger council members showed immediate signs of acceptance, their forms vibrating with possibilities. Even some of the elder members began to shift, their rigid patterns softening as they processed the undeniable evidence before them. "We recommend," Kelrax concluded, "establishing a joint learning initiative, not to teach humans our methods, but to learn from them how to develop our own versions of adaptive organization." The Patchwork Pioneers crew had already begun working with interested assembly members, showing them not just what they did, but how they developed the capability to do it. The process couldn't be rushed. Like any evolution, it required time and experience. "Order," Doc observed quietly to the assembled council, "isn't something you impose from above. It's something you nurture from within. Every species has to find their own path to that understanding." The assembly's perfect system was transforming, not through revolution, but through evolution. Just as human organizations had evolved from rigid hierarchies to fluid networks, the assembly was beginning its own journey toward a more sophisticated form of order. As the classification matrix completed its restructuring, Kelrax turned to Doc with a question that would have been unthinkable mere weeks before. "Will you teach us how to unlearn control?" Doc smiled, recognizing the first step in a long journey. The assembly hadn't just survived a crisis. They had emerged from it ready to evolve. Sometimes, she reflected, the most perfect system is the one that knows how to adapt when perfection itself needs to change.